Steven, a CEO of a small engineering company, sits in his home office. It's late at night, which means his real working hours have just begun. Steven scans his contact list and finds a green bubble. Somebody's staying late, which means they're either overworked or bored out of their minds waiting for some data to be processed. You'd be surprised how much time engineers spend just looking at a progress bar on a computer that went out of fashion in the last millennium. In other words, this might be the prime time for small talk. Steven sends a message. A response comes back. Bingo! Steven was right. It's a promising response. Very promising. Unbelievably promising. One of his friends is working on a pretty exclusive project. He's participating in the flight tests of the F-35, the world's most advanced fighter jet. And it seems he has more information on it than Steven thought. Now, it's time to act. Steven sends out an email to an associate, a document containing everything he knows about this friend. And he knows a lot. A few minutes later, the associate responds with a link. It's tailor-made for the friend to click on. Now it's Steven's job to make sure that happens. An easy job. Very easy, in fact. Now it's up to his associate again. And the associate doesn't take long. He knows what he's doing, and his work just brought in another prize. The associate is a hacker. Steven is a social engineer, and together they just brought home over 100 pages worth of classified materials about one of the most secret military projects on Earth, with the help of just a short chat and one malicious link. Steven and his associate have been working like this for several years already. They're a good team. It's only a matter of time before they bring home the whole F-35, bit by bit, document by document. It's an operation that will change the world, and there will be no rollback. Imagine that you have to steal a fighter jet. Not an old fighter jet. Those can be bought pretty easily. You need a new one, cutting-edge stuff. Only a few prototypes, and even those aren't finished. Well, you could infiltrate a hostile foreign country as a spy, break into a military base, do some action movie shenanigans, and fly out. In the whole history of the world, this happened exactly 0 times, because it's literally impossible unless you live in a Tom Clancy novel. But you're smart. You know a thing or two about hacking. You could break into the company that made the fighter jet and steal the blueprints. That's almost as good as the real thing. Except, there's no one folder named Blueprints that contains every minute detail of a fighter jet. There simply can't be, because a fighter jet is not one thing. It's a collection of thousands, no, millions of components designed and made by hundreds of different teams and companies. A lot of those components vary, change, and get improved over time. Some are bought off the shelf, and others are artisan pieces made by mechanics at the airbase. Some are built by mom-and-pop shops in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska, and delivered to a local military base with a bow on top. Others are so secret, they might as well be teleported from the 47th dimension by a sweatshop full of aliens in Area 51. You get the idea. It's a Byzantine, mind-bogglingly complicated system of engineering and logistical nightmares, and the military wouldn't want it any other way. Oh, and you know what else is complicated? Video production. As you probably noticed, this video wasn't made by AI. It was researched, edited, and uploaded by a team of real humans. If you want to support handmade content, why not do that through our YouTube channel membership? That's a new thing we're setting up. Our members will be able to see bonus content like full interviews conducted for these documentaries. And we've just released the first of them. It's the interview with Heather Adkins, the vice president at Google, about her role in combating Operation Aurora. Some very interesting stuff there, exclusively for our channel members. If you don't want to become one, no problem. You can still like and subscribe. Thanks. Anyway, fighter jets. How do you steal one? Let's go back to a concrete example. Since the end of the Cold War, the new hot thing in military aircraft design was stealth. A set of geometrical features and materials that makes your jet somewhat less visible to a radar, Not invisible, mind you, just less visible, but enough to make it a matter of life and death in certain situations. The US was the first country to invest a lot into this new technology. By the early 2000s, it had two brand new stealth fighter jet designs, the F-22 and the F-35, both manufactured by a company called Lockheed Martin. And the thing is, this was two more stealth fighter jet models than the rest of the world had combined. The main reason for this is simple. Stealth is hard and expensive. Case in point, the F-35, otherwise known as the most expensive military project to ever exist. Now, it's no secret that throughout its development, this thing got a bit of a bad rap. Reason being, it was not only the most expensive, it was the most ambitious military project too. The idea was basically to cram the functions of a lot of different aircraft into one. For example, in the times before, the military had dedicated fighters that would duke it out with the enemy planes, dedicated attack aircraft that would blow stuff up, dedicated electronic warfare platforms that would jam enemy radars, and a few other weird jets for, special occasions. The F-35 alone had to do all of that, and also do it better than any of these other airplanes. Otherwise, what's the point of replacing them? Stuffing all of that into one jet wasn't really possible, so the developers compromised on making the F-35 three different aircraft. The only things uniting them were the name, the look, and a few interchangeable parts. Remember we talked about fighter jets being these incredibly overcomplicated systems where thousands of companies and teams design different pieces, and nobody really has a full grasp on how all of that works? Well, with the F-35, feel free to multiply this mess by 3. And then by the amount of jets it was designed to replace, because all of that had to be in there, and then by the fact that it was a stealth aircraft, and stealth is hard. In short, this wasn't just a Byzantine system, it was a Byzantine system of Byzantine systems stretching across half the globe and countless companies of ever-varying size and shape. The theft of that system had to be just as complicated. We know what we know about this operation thanks to several sources, mainly the documents published by the US government. Spoiler alert, the main guy of this story got caught and pleaded guilty. In the coming years, tons of data from the trial got published, including all kinds of court documents. Independent investigations done by journalists confirm some of that, so we don't just take the government's word for it. And then, of course, some information was leaked. If you ask us, that's the best kind of information. And shout out to aviation reporters who understand engineering better than we do and connected the dots figuring out how China actually used the stolen information. So here's how the attack worked. Su Bin, who often went by his alias Stephen Su, was a man in his 40s with a nice multi-million-dollar engineering business. If you trust the website of his company, it traded in cable harnesses for everything from railways to spacecraft. Information elsewhere on the Chinese internet says that the company specialized in aviation, including the military kind. What exactly it did is a bit muddled, but it supposedly brought world-leading products and services to China, which turned out to be surprisingly honest. Su Bin didn't live in China though. He had residency in Canada, but traveled between China, Canada, and the US a lot, constantly visiting trade shows and conferences. His real job there wasn't selling his stuff or promoting his company though. What Su mostly did was networking, trying to get to know the right people and get their trust. Acquaintances describe him as a likable guy, or as one FBI agent put it, not an asshole, a rarity in his line of business. Su wasn't a hacker. He was well-versed in military aviation and had all the people skills a spy might need, but he wasn't into breaching computers. For that, he teamed up with 2 hackers who resided in China. Those hackers turned out to have pretty good OPSEC though. We don't know their real names, and the court documents refer to them just as uncharged co-conspirators. Let's call them Bob and Steve. Bob and Steve were professionals. The correspondence between them and Su shows that they both served in a certain organization, where Steve was Bob's superior, while Bob performed most of the grunt work. We have every reason to suspect that the organization they worked for was a cyber unit of the Chinese military, and the correspondence hints at them being high-ranking officers plenty of times. We don't know much about their personal lives though. However, on July 7, 2011, Bob sent Steve an email with his work history. Maybe that was needed to get a promotion or something. The history included some pretty high-profile hacks. One of them was a breach of an American military contractor, with the theft of 20 gigabytes of tech information on a drone. Another project Bob worked on was the breach of a joint Russian-Indian company behind a hypersonic missile called BrahMos. Bob supposedly hacked one of the external-facing systems of the project and was about to jump onto internal networks. As you can see, Bob was no rookie. We don't know much about Steve, but the fact that he was Bob's superior says plenty enough about him. In fact, the only reason we know about Bob and Steve was because after arresting Sue, the feds got access to his Gmail inbox. Some of his past correspondences with the hackers was probably deleted, but a lot of it wasn't. Unlike Bob and Steve, Sue didn't have a good grasp on the whole OPSEC thing. Bob and Steve began working with Sue in October 2008. The hackers brought their tools. They had established command and control servers in the United States, Korea, and Singapore. They also had private server farms in Hong Kong and Macau, with all the necessary paperwork to make the attribution difficult. Unfortunately, we don't know almost anything about the malware they used. If there were any mentions of it in the correspondence between Sue and the hackers, the court documents were careful to avoid it. Nevertheless, we can make some educated guesses, but more on that later. Meanwhile, starting in 2008, Sue began working his way up the high society of American aviation engineering, with Bob and Steve always on call. The work wasn't fast. According to the FBI, Sue cultivated his contacts slowly, getting to know them better through years of meeting and chatting about common interests. By 2010, this strategy began to bear fruit. Sue's first real job involved Boeing, America's largest aircraft manufacturer with deep ties in the military. According to the hackers themselves, they started reconnaissance on Boeing's system in 2009 and breached its networks in January 2010. Sue's part in initiating the breach is not clear, but for the later stages of the hack, he was crucial. The hackers spent a year in Boeing's networks, moving around undetected and trying to figure out what's where. All that time, Sue guided them through all the technical and bureaucratic jargon, helped them understand what's really important and what's just junk. For example, marking important files in the lists they sent him. In the end, the hackers exfiltrated 65 gigabytes of engineering data on the C-17 Globemaster, one of the largest military transport aircraft in the Air Force's inventory. The C-17 wasn't new. It was developed in the 80s and inherited by Boeing from another company. Collecting data on it still wasn't easy. It's a bit funny to hear that about Boeing, but in their correspondence, the hackers described the company's security as surprisingly competent. They claimed breaching it was really hard, with internal safeguards everywhere. Servers with classified data were brought online just for short periods at a time and strictly supervised. The booty had to be siphoned out slowly, with every precaution possible. It took months for the C-17 to get stolen. In February 2010, as the data was dripping away from Boeing servers, a question arose on what to do with it. Sue asked Bob and Steve to start negotiations with Chinese aircraft companies. A few days later, one of them offered a sum that satisfied Sue. He sent his bank account number. 3 years later, Xi'an Aircraft Industrial Corporation, one of China's state-owned equipment producers, came out with Xi'an Y-20, a transport aircraft that bore more than a superficial resemblance to the C-17. To be fair, the American airplane wasn't the only source of inspiration for it. According to aviation experts, it also has some DNA from large European and Russian transport planes too. Apparently, Boeing wasn't the only one to be hacked. But back to our team. With one successful operation under their belt and a cache of money to fund Sue's further operations, the team began looking for something more sophisticated. By that time, Sue acquired quite a few friends in high places. This meant that sometimes he didn't even need to resort to hacking. People were willing to give him classified information directly. He would ask for some unimportant detail, something minor, a design of some small piece of aircraft you wouldn't even think could be important. He would tell people that there's good money to be made in selling that technology to a civilian company, and the people complied. As the FBI explained, Sue was not an asshole about that. Not an asshole at all. But in more cases than one, Bob and Steve stepped in. They used Sue's directions in hacking his friends and their companies. According to documents, most of this hacking was spear phishing, emails and messages disguised as something trustworthy. something Sue made sure the victim would click. Then, a connection to the victim's machine and malware that would record every keystroke and download every file from their devices. In April 2010, likely through multiple unrelated friends, Sue got access to 2 schematics of important components of the F-22, America's first stealth fighter jet. Slightly later, he also got his hands on several PowerPoint presentations explaining some engineering of this jet. Funny enough, stealing F-22 data is among the jobs Bob listed in his achievements document. That's how we know that the total amount was just 220 megabytes. Not much, but nothing to scoff at too. In November 2010, the team got its hands on some slides and reports relating to something even more serious. Supposedly, it was a design of advanced military technology codenamed Project A. It was so secret, not even its real name was revealed. In his emails, Sue said that these slides will allow the Chinese military to build something similar, by standing on giants' shoulders. By 2012, the team set its sights on its biggest prize yet, the most expensive project in America's military history, and the most advanced aircraft to fly at that point, the F-35. As to how that went, the court documents are understandably brief, even more brief than with the mysterious Project A. One of the things Sue's team stole was a 120-page flight testing plan for the aircraft. The document was extremely classified and contained all kinds of technical data on the F-35's capabilities. Full transparency, we don't know the exact way it was stolen, and the story you saw in the intro of this video is a dramatization of one of the possible ways that it might have happened. What we know is that it was exfiltrated by Bob. He later sent it to Sue to confirm if that's the thing they wanted. Then, Sue sent his document back with the Chinese translation and some comments added, ready to be transferred to the Chinese military. This was something the team did numerous times before. With every bit of the information he obtained, Sue would create detailed reports and instructions, so that his leadership could easily understand what's there and appreciate the team's contribution. And here is where Sue's story ends. Insiders and law enforcement hinted that this plan wasn't the only F-35 related bit of data Sue got, that his loot also included numerous systems of the aircraft, nagged out of his friends in the industry, or fished out of them, or stolen by Bob and Steve. But if we look beyond Sue's indictment, things got nastier. Bob and Steve were the muscle behind these attacks, the military hackers who made it possible. Sue was their guide, an agent deployed in a foreign country to do social engineering. And he wasn't the only one. He was the one who got caught, arrested in 2014 by the Canadian police, and later extradited to the US. Many of the attacks, the traces of which had been glimpsed through his emails, were confirmed by the victims. But these weren't the only such attacks to get noticed. The agents who enabled them didn't get caught though. From other reporting and leaks, we know that Sue's colleagues have breached other companies that worked on the F-35. It was a whole system of Sue-like agents. They were piecing together the jet, component by component, bringing bits and pieces of it. How many Sues were there in total? We don't know. And how many Bobs and Steves? Well, that's something we have a clearer view of. Naturally, we have very little insight into the investigation the US military and its contractors performed after these attacks. From Sue's emails and files, only as much was revealed as was necessary to convict him of stealing classified data. He was sentenced to be locked up for 4 years and got a sizable fine. Most likely, he's out of prison now and reaps the benefits from his temporary spy gig by living in China. But he was only a cog in a much bigger operation. The first glimpses that this operation targeted the F-35 came in 2009, when anonymous US officials leaked to the media some details about these attacks. According to them, the breaches started in 2007. By 2009, several terabytes of data on the F-35 systems were stolen, mostly the electronics and some design details. And this was even before Sue started his work. A few years later, in one of the NSA documents leaked by Edward Snowden, more information on the attacks was revealed. The Chinese hackers apparently got their hands on some details of the radar, the engine, and other components. The slides also mentioned that besides the advanced jets, the spies also got some information on a space-based laser, a laser you put in space to blow up stuff there. Only recently was it revealed that the American military is actually working on something like this. 2 decades ago, this was pure science fiction. or something you would prefer to hide behind a non-specific name. Like, for example, Project A. Was it ever built by the Chinese military? Who knows? But various systems and pieces of the F-35 were definitely built. What aviation experts noticed in the years after this hack was how the Chinese fighter jets suddenly became a lot more similar to the American ones. The stealth coating changed its color. The shape of the wings, the radar, and the air intakes became uncannily F-35-like. China even built a bit of a clone of the F-35. At first, it was similar in just the general shape. With years and new prototypes, the resemblance became more and more visible. The Chinese hackers were stealing the jet piece by piece, with the help of forward-deployed agents like Sue. It was a massive network of operations, with probably dozens of agents deployed in the field, and an army of hackers helping them. Talking about that army, we can make a pretty good guess on how it looked. Sue's time in the spy game overlaps with a known operation that bears a lot of resemblance to the attacks we described: Operation Shady Rat. It was uncovered in 2011, and its traces were found all over Western companies. The person who discovered and named it is the former head of security at McAfee, Dmitry Alperovich. We actually spoke to him about that story.
Probably the most famous operation was Shady Rat, that was released in August of 2011. And that was a comprehensive investigation where I was able to get access to some of the command and control data from servers that the Chinese were running that would control victims over the course of years, and get pretty granular information on the full victimology, or at least a comprehensive victimology for that particular group, which ended up being later called APT-1.
Dmitry's team, as well as some others, a surprising number of others, have actually managed to breach APT-1. They got inside its command and control servers, found its location, and tied this group to a particular military unit within the Chinese army, the one specifically responsible for industrial and military espionage through hacking. In 2014, the FBI indicted 5 officers from that unit. 5 people who were performing attacks on American military contractors and other companies between 2006 and 2014, in the time frame where Sue's, Bob's, and Steve's little adventure took place. So, are some of these 5 people Bob and Steve? Quite likely. The American government was careful to avoid any connections, and the court documents were scrubbed of any indicators of compromise. So far, it's just a guess, but the best guess we have. Despite that, the story is quite telling and explains a lot about how these kinds of attacks happen. The F-35 is only the tip of the iceberg. It's an incredibly complicated piece of technology that required years to collect piece by piece. Many other technologies are infinitely less complex, and their pieces are a lot easier to access. Easy pickings for an operation of this scale.
Dozens of industries, everything from manufacturing, defense, government institutions, nonprofits, agriculture, insurance, software, obviously, and other high technology companies, literally virtually every sector of the economy. And then when I wrote my report on Shady Rat, I basically said that, one, what we're witnessing is the greatest transfer of wealth in history, because if you extrapolate sort of the trend lines from the investigations I've done, going back to Aurora, Night Dragon, Shady Rat, you basically have to assume that nearly everyone is compromised. In fact, the other line that I coined at the time was that there are 2 types of companies: those that know that they've been hacked and those that don't yet know. But the implication is that they are all compromised. You know, if you sort of look at the aggregate value of the intellectual property that was being taken from all these companies over the course of years, it had to be unequivocally the greatest transfer of wealth we've ever seen.
Thank you for watching another installment of No Rollback by Cybernews. If you want to know more about Shady Rat as a whole, we have a separate video on it, and we have many more of these short documentaries on other hacks too. Subscribe for more of them, and see you next time.